So for our thread catch, the first thing to do is take one of your panels of fabric and your fusible fleece. Have your fusible fleece facing upwards, with the glue facing upwards, put your fabric facing downwards, and then just like we did on the main part of the overlocker cover, we just want to hold that in place for 15 seconds to fuse the fabric to the fleece. So there's our panel which has been fused to the fleece. Now this is going to fold in half lengthways, like so, in order to become our thread catcher there. So don't get it wrong and fold it this way, so it should be sort of this way here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew some quilting lines on here. So this is the one that I finished before, and you can see that these quilting lines look quite pretty coming down here. And rather than, you've got two choices really. You could just draw the quilting lines on again, but I'm going to show you a different way of doing it, which is quite nice to get these more narrow quilting lines, and it's a bit quicker and easier too. So I'm going to sew vertical quilting lines all the way down this panel. I'm going to use my sewing machine foot as a guide. So what I've done is, if I just show you, let me put this back to the centre. So did you see the needle move there? That's in the centre now. And if I go to change the needle position, you can see if I move this dial here, and you just have to look at your instructions to see how you move your needle position. But I can move that all the way over to this edge here. And then if I put my fabric under my foot there, you can see that I'm sewing right onto the left hand side there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my stitch length to 3. I've got my thread colour in the white thread colour that will look nice with this yellow rather than the blue, which would show up a bit too much. And then what I'm going to do is, as I'm sewing, I'm just keeping my eye here that I'm against the raw edge. And that's my first line of stitching done. Then I'm just going to come in next door to it. So I put my foot down so that the edge of my foot matches up with that stitch line. And you can see that by moving my needle over, I'm giving myself a wider margin. And I'm just going to continue like that until I've quilted the whole panel. Come back to the beginning again, match up the side of my foot with my stitching, and off I go. Quilted, our thread catcher is now all lovely and quilted, so that's going to eventually fold up like that. But before we carry on, let's add the Velcro to it. So remember, you've got a 1 centimetre seam allowance at the top here, so we want to come down 2 centimetres to give ourselves plenty of room. So if your quilt has stretched out of shape a bit, if this this panel, I should say here, has stretched out of shape a bit, you can trim it down so you've got a nice straight edge. And you want to just draw a line or make a guide for yourself 2 centimetres down there. Oh. Invisible ink. There we go. And so your Velcro is just going to sit at 2 centimetres below the top edge like that. So we can just trim that down to size. And then we want to pin that in place. If you've got really big clips, you might be able to just about clip it in place. If you've got the really big quilter's clips. There we are. So that Velcro is now lined up with that edge. So I've got 2 centimetre margin before my Velcro. And what we're going to do now is just sew down here and down here to attach the Velcro to my panel. So I just want to put all the settings back to normal after moving my needle across. Let's put it back in its normal position. And I'll just sew that Velcro in place. And same again on the other side. The other side is easier because it's already stitched down. So now we're going to attach our Lamy Fix glossy film to our fabric. So first of all, make sure that your fabric, and so this is the interior fabric for your thread catcher pocket, make sure that that has not got anything on it, any fluff, and also give it a good iron. I've put a dirty old tea towel, that sounds horrible, not a dirty old tea towel, but just, you know, a tea towel that I don't mind getting sticky on my ironing board. And then I put my glossy film on top of that, and that's the matte side down. So the matte side is the gluey side, and I've got the shiny side facing up. I've just got to say, I've never seen so much rain in my life. Outside it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's pitch black, and it's pouring. Sorry about if you can hear the rain. Anyway, back to work. So we're going to fold the tea towel up here to sandwich everything, and then we'll just give everything a light press. So I've got my iron between 2 to 3 dots, and so my glossy Lamy Fix is sandwiched there. And you just want to hold for 8 seconds at a time. So you're not really each time you lift the iron, you lift it and move it and then count to 8. And that should fuse your glossy Lamy Fix to your fabric. And just this means that your threads that fall into your thread catcher will be easier to clean out. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you're making this at home without my kit and you don't have any of this, it's just not the end of the world. It's just a little extra to make it nice to use. And of course, if you're using this, you know, you're going to use this as an additional pocket, then you don't have to worry about this at all. Next, we're going to make the inserts for the sides, so the little godets that go in either side of our thread catcher. So you've got 4 of those all together, 2 pairs. You just want to put those right sides together, and with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, we are going to sew across the top, whoops, and across the bottom, and then we'll turn out. So we're just going to sew across here, across here, across here, and across here. So I've got a 1 centimetre seam allowance. I'm going to match up the top of my fabric there with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then just sew across the top there. I'll swivel that round and do the same again on the bottom. And then I just want to repeat that for my other insert. So there they both are. Now I just want to turn these through to right sides. So you're only sewing at the top and bottom. You're not sewing along the edges there. So just turn those through. So all our components are now prepared, ready to make our thread catcher. You've got your quilted panel with your Velcro on it, your laminated panel, and your two little Go-Day inserts there. So let's start by, the first thing that you want to do is turn these, so you're looking at the wrong side, and you just want to press up each of the shorter ends by 1 centimetre. So with the laminated version, it's probably wise to use a pressing cloth because of the laminate film that you've added to it. When you finger crease it, it kind of holds itself in place. So then when you put your cloth over the top, it stays there. Whoops. So that's now been pressed up by about 1 centimetre on either side. And now we're going to do the same with our quilted panel. So bearing in mind you've got 2 centimetres to the top of the Velcro, you can just fold your quilted panel back until the raw edge meets the Velcro there. Same on the other side. Next, we want to take each of our panels and just press them in half to find the halfway point. So with the laminated panel, you can just finger press to get that central crease there. And with your quilted panel, you can press with your iron. Just be careful with when you're pressing onto the fleece that you're not using a very hot iron. So there you go, there's our 2 panels prepared there, and we can see that this is our central line here. And we want to take our Go-Days, our little triangle, they look like flower pots actually, and then we want to press those in half as well. So now what we want to do is sandwich our Go-Days in between our 2 pieces of fabric. So take your quilted fabric and one of your Go-Day pieces, and you just want to open that up and match that up there, like so. So you're going right to the top there, and this should just fit in between the top where you folded over your fabric and the central fold. And then we want to sandwich that, so you're going to put your laminated fabric on top there. So with that, those edges folded down. Oops, and we'll just clip that in place. The iron is making a bit of noise there. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start up here 1 centimetre in from the edge, and we're just going to sew down to that central crease. If your crease isn't very visible, just mark it with a chalk or with a pen so that you can easily see where it is. So you're going to start with a back stitch here, 1 centimetre in, and then another back stitch just here at the crease where you're going to stop. So I'm just sewing along, sewing through all those layers. With a 1 centimetre seam allowance, I'm just at that 10mm line. I can see my creases there, and that's just beyond where the Go-Day finishes. So I'll just come down to that crease, do a couple of back stitches, and cut my threads. There you go. So now at that point, I want to get my little scissors, and I'm just going to snip into the stitching, not through the stitching, just through both layers there. That will allow me to open that up a little bit, because what I want to do now is open that up. Let's bring you back a bit and bring the other side of the Go-Day round here. So you're just pivoting that round, and you're going to do the other side. So I've just swiveled that round. This Go-Day will pleat into the middle. It should finish again where the where that fold is, and you can see that that will just come down to where you made that snip or just before. And then you just want to fold your laminated panel up there. So you're just kind of pivoting everything round. And those snips, by doing this sort of half and half, it's a bit easier. And those snips just help out too. So just line up those raw edges, put a couple of clips in to secure everything in place, and start back where you left off. So do a little back stitch, and then we're going to come all the way back up. So you should find now that your first go day is inserted, and that will just fold in like so to close up, so that when your thread catches on your front of your overlocker cover, it opens and closes like this. So now we want to put in our second side, and we're going to do exactly the same technique. So you want to take your go day there, line the top up with the bottom of that area where you folded it down. So that's going to fold down like that, so it's right at the top. Just pin or clip in place. And we're going to sew down here with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. We want to sandwich that between, we want to sandwich that between the quilted outer cover and the laminated cover. So we just fold that over like so. So there's your first one that you've done. We're now going to do the second one. So just fold that over and line that up and put your clips in place. And then just like before, we'll start sewing at the top with a little back stitch or 1 centimetre in. We're going to come down here. I can see that that's where my central crease is. If that's going to be hard to see when we're sewing, you can just mark it with a fabric marker or a chalk pen there, that halfway point. I don't know if you can see that line clearly that I've just made there. And then at this point we snip in and we just pivot, bringing our go day round and drawing it round to the other side and finishing at the end. So we'll end up with our 2 go days sewn in, and then we can turn the whole thing through. So just like before, pop that under my machine, lining up my raw edges with the 10mm or 1 centimetre line. And I'm just going to start sewing now. A few back stitches to begin with. And I'm going to sew until I get to my halfway point just here, which is when I'll stop. So we've just sewn that second go day in. So just to recap, you sew down here, snip when you get to the halfway point in order to be able to draw the other side of your go day round, and then you sandwich it between the 2 layers again and sew all the way to the bottom, back stitching at the end. So it is a bit fiddly, but hopefully you can see that what we now have is our 2 go days in, one in either side, and we can now push this through to the right side, and you will have your go days set in there on either side of your thread catcher. So you have your laminated cloth in the middle and your quilted cloth on the outside. Your edges are just folded in there, so we'll just clip those folded edges in place. And then we're just going to sew across the top to finish and neaten. So just tuck everything in, tuck in any raw edges and secure with a clip. And we're just going to sew across the top there to close that. We're going to sew really close to the top edge, and then same again on the back side. So the back side is the side with the Velcro. Just clip, fold in the raw edges and clip in place. Like so. So in a minute, so we're just going to sew across the top edge here and across that top edge there. So I'll just fold that out the way, tuck that under my machine there, and I just want to sew nice and close to that folded edge, just to close up the open edge at the front and at the back of your thread catcher. A couple of back stitches to begin with, and then you can see I'm just sewing nice and close to the edge. And a little back stitch to end with, just to hold everything in place. There you go, so you can see my stitch line just holding that top edge nice and neat. I just need to trim off any little threads, and that's that edge finished. And then I just want to do exactly the same again on the other side. There's our thread catcher finished. So you've got your laminated fabric on the inside, your quilted fabric on the outside, Velcro at the back. And I just want to give this a quick press just to train these go-days at the end to tuck to the inside when my thread catcher is closed. So I'll just fold those to the inside. And I'm obviously pressing on the quilted area. I don't really want to press on the laminated area. And I'll just give that a press. And that's now finished. So we're going to do a bit of hand stitching next. We want to stitch our button onto the front there of our thread catcher so that we can have a loop on the front of our machine cover to hold it closed when it's not in use. So if you measure across here, this is about 20 centimetres, so halfway is 10. I've just marked that halfway mark with a pen there. So I want my button to sit at about the halfway point, and you know, leave a bit of space at the top. So I'm going to have it sitting about here. So I think I will just mark on my buttonholes like so. And then I'm going to use my hand sewing needle just to sew my button in place. So I'll start by knotting my thread into my fabric. I'm using double thickness thread for speed. So I just create a loop and then put my needle back through the loop to create a knot. And then these lovely pretty buttons have a sort of have 4 holes, so it looks quite nice to make a cross shape. So just go 1, oops, 2, 3 and 4. And then now come across to the neighbouring hole and do the same. 1, whoops, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'll bring my thread through to the front, and I just want to whip that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then bring my thread back to the back. You just whip the thread a couple of times to create a bit of a shank. Bring my thread back to the back, and then I will just come in and out of the fabric there, back through my loop to create a knot. Do a double knot there to make sure. Then I will bring my needle back into my quilt. Whoops. Poke it back out through the layers somewhere. Just to hide my thread tails. And then I will trim that off. Pull my thread tails back in there. So that's my button now sewn onto the front of my thread catcher as well. So next we want to make a loop using some of our binding. So we're going to make a loop, whoops, that will sit like that and attach onto the front of our sewing machine cover. So take a 15 centimetre length of binding, cut yourself off a 15 centimetre length. And then I want to just press that in half. I've rethreaded my machine with blue thread. And I just want to be close to the edge there. Oops, little thread tail getting in the way. I'm just sewing right on the edge there. So take your front panel, and your thread catcher is just going to sit there on your Velcro. Don't forget that you're going to leave a little gap there for your binding as well. So that's going to sit just there. And so therefore you want your, I'm just going to get the position for lining up your button loop here. So that is going to sit round my button like so, and I'm going to want it to sort of finish there. So I'm going to sew this button loop now to the front of my machine cover. So if you think that should be at the halfway point here, but bearing in mind you want to leave a centimetre for your binding there. So I'm just going to pin that in place. So as you're happy, we can now stitch these in place. So just carefully remove your thread catcher just for a second, and we'll go and stitch these in place. So don't worry about your stitches showing up, because these will all be covered up in a minute. So there's my hanging loop in place. We're now going to take another piece of binding and just cover up the top raw edges there, just to make it look nice and neat. Just to let you know the position of mine, if I measure across the top edge of that Velcro there, that measures 23. Now I've got 1 centimetre for my binding, which leaves me with 22, and then 11 is the centre point, so 22 divided by 2 is 11, which is the centre point of where that hanging loop is, and the top of my hanging loops are 4 centimetres above the top edge of my elastic. But you measure yours up, because you might have some slight tiny differences. but that's roughly about where it should fall. So this time cut a piece of binding which is 6 centimetres long. And then we want to grab our iron and just press in 1 centimetre on either side. And that is going to sit on top of that hanging loop, so I can fold that in half to get the centre point, just to make sure it looks symmetrical, and then line that up with the centre of my loop, and you can see that that's just going to sit on top of the loop there. And what we shall do is we shall just pop a pin there to keep it in place, and then what we'll do is we will just sew around the edge of that tab there, just to create a nice neat finish. So I'm just going to sew around the edge there. You can take that pin out now. Come to that first corner, pivot round. Go back over where I started a little bit. So the front panel of our overlocker cover is now finished. We've done all of our features and details that we need for it. We can now start to construct the cover itself, now that we've done all of these lovely features at the front.